At the park by the fountain, Stevie tugged her hand toward the ice cream cart, and Ruth was already reaching into her wallet when she saw the price. A chocolate cone was $4.50, and the wallet held $3.12 and a penny that solved nothing, but sat there the way hope sits when you've got a penny's worth left. Stevie glanced into the wallet. Not on purpose, he was just small, and the wallet was at eye level. He saw. And the 8-year-old's face, with a juice stain on his chin, changed, and he said, "Grandma, I changed my mind. Let's go on the swings." He hadn't changed his mind, but he lied. And a child's lie to save his grandmother from shame hit Ruth harder than any grown-up word. Social Security, $1,490 a month. On the stove, a 2-gallon pot of chili that nobody was there to eat. But everything in Ruth Weber's life was about to change. And it would start with a neighbour who'd say, "Ruth, let me pay you for this." If you're retired and you count the days until the next check, stop and listen. This story might change your life after 60. Not someday, right now. Friends, write in the comments, where are you from, and does your Social Security last until the end of the month? We want to know who's listening. And hit that like button so this story reaches the people who need it right now. The pot stood on the stove. 2-gallon, blue enamel with a chipped handle that Pete knocked off in 1998 when he dropped it reaching for a beer. And the handle chipped, but the pot survived. And survived long. Outlasted 3 apartments, 2 kitchen remodels, and Pete himself. Inside the pot was chili. Fresh, Sunday chili, made by a recipe that existed on no paper because the recipe lived in the hands. 2 pounds of ground beef, 1 pound of chuck stew meat diced small, 2 cans of kidney beans, crushed tomatoes, onion, garlic, cumin, chili powder, a little cocoa powder, the secret nobody guessed, and all of it by feel, no measuring cups, the same way her mother made it, and her mother's mother. And somewhere in that chain, the recipe lost its paper and gained its precision. And the precision was not metric, but palm-sized. A pinch of salt was Ruth's pinch and nobody else's. And every cook's pinch is her own, like handwriting. Sunday, 2 o'clock, table set. A bowl, a spoon, cornbread, 2 squares, cut thick the way Pete liked it, who said thin cornbread was cardboard and refused to eat cardboard. And across the table, another bowl, another spoon, another 2 squares of cornbread. And Ruth, seeing this, stopped at the stove with the ladle in her hand, because she'd set 2 places, automatically, by a 40-year habit so deep in her hands that the hands didn't ask the head for permission. The head knew Pete had been gone 2 years, but the hands didn't. And every Sunday they set a second place. And every Sunday Ruth put it back in the cabinet. And every Sunday the cabinet accepted the bowl silently, the way a mailbox accepts a letter nobody will read. Pete died in 2023, at work, heart attack, instant, like a light switch, there and gone. Plumber, 44 years together, and 52 Sundays a year. Chili. And Pete sat down at exactly 2 and said one word. Well. And well meant, serve it, I'm ready. And the chili in the bowl was for Pete not a meal, but an event. The only event of Sunday worth surviving Saturday for. If the chili was good, Pete was silent and ate. If it wasn't, also silent, also ate, but tapped his spoon on the edge of the bowl, quiet, rhythmic. And that tapping was a review, short and merciless. And in 44 years, Pete tapped 3 times, meaning 3 bad batches out of nearly 3,000. And the defect rate, 0.1%, would have been the envy of any factory. Ruth Weber, 67 years old, Wichita, Kansas, two-bedroom apartment in a brick building off Hillside. 31 years as a cook in the cafeteria at $259. 400 kids a shift, 6 pots, and chili on Mondays was her calling card. Teachers came for seconds, and seconds ran out before the teachers finished complaining about their pay. And in the school, they called her Miss Ruth. And Miss Ruth was not familiarity, but a title, like chef in a real kitchen. Only in a school kitchen, the chef wears not a toque, but a hairnet. And Ruth's hairnet, white, starched, was the crown of an authority before which children and the vice principal alike bowed. Social Security, $1,490. After Pete, Ruth sat at the kitchen table and did the math on the back of a utility bill. Pencil, cook's habit. Rent took $8.95. Medicare, co-pays, prescriptions, $2.25. Blood pressure, hereditary. Knees, 31 years on her feet at a stove. Eye drops, vision fading. Groceries, $3.55. And groceries meant potatoes, rice, bread, butter, chicken once a week. And if by month's end there was enough for tomatoes, the month was a success. Utilities, gas, phone. Remainder, $160 for everything. Clothes, household, repairs, the unforeseen. And the unforeseen was a grandchild's ice cream cone at $4.50 and a wallet with $3.12. Diane called Sundays at 10. Daughter, 44, Kansas City, bookkeeper. Voice businesslike and guilty at once. The way a voice sounds when the person knows she should help more, but helps less than she can. And the space between can and does is filled with a mortgage, a husband, a child, and city prices that eat a salary faster than Pete ate chili. Victor, son, 41, Omaha, engineer, called less often, every other week, and his voice was not guilty but lost, because men don't know how to help their mothers with words, and with money, not always able, and the awkwardness hung in the phone like the pause between "How are you?" and "Fine," and both knew "fine" was untrue, but both stayed quiet. Chili. 2 gallons. For one person. Madness. Ruth made 2 gallons every Sunday, and every Sunday asked herself, why? The answer was simple and impossible. Her hands didn't know how to make less. 40 years, every Sunday, for a family. Pete, Diane, Victor, sometimes neighbours, sometimes Pete's buddies from the plumbing company. And the 2-gallon pot was sized for a life where people sat at the table, hungry people, and their hunger was Ruth's responsibility. Now the table held 1. But the hands reached for the same 2 pounds of beef, the same 2 cans of beans, and making less felt like cutting off a hand. Possible to survive, but you wouldn't want to. The chili was made, ladled into quart containers, 5 of them bought at Dollar Tree for $1.50, put in the fridge and eaten through the week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And by Friday the chili had changed. Thicker, darker, and Ruth told herself, it's better aged. But really, it had grown tiresome. And the word tiresome applied to chili sounded in Ruth's head like treason, and she didn't forgive herself the treason every Friday. Mildred, the neighbour from downstairs, 70, divorced. Husband left for another woman, not died, and left for Mildred was worse than died, because the dead can be mourned and released, but a man alive with someone else can be neither mourned nor released. Couldn't cook and didn't want to. Her ex had cooked all their married life. He was a line cook, and the irony was that a cook's wife ate worse than a plumber's, because a cook cooked at work and at home lay on the couch. After he left, Mildred ate sandwiches, frozen dinners and yogurt, and the combination was so bleak that one evening she came upstairs to Ruth's for tea and stayed for chili. 3 Sundays in a row Mildred came for tea, with butter cookies from the dollar store and a face Ruth recognised. hungry but proud. The kind that says, "I came for conversation, not for food," while the eyes looked at the pot. Ruth ladled, Mildred ate, and both pretended the main event was tea. On the third Sunday, Mildred set her spoon down, wiped her mouth with a napkin, and said, "Ruth, enough. Let me pay. I feel guilty every Sunday, free. $8 a quart, and don't argue. I've got a conscience, and a conscience costs more than chili." And "let me pay" from Mildred, a woman who lived on Social Security herself and counted her own days to the 15th, sounded in the kitchen not like commerce, but like recognition. The chili was worth money, and the money was earned, and paying was not charity, but respect. And respect for another person's chili is respect for another person's hands. Ruth looked at Mildred, and at the pot, and at the 5 containers in the fridge that every week filled with chili she ate till Friday, and that by Friday had grown tiresome, and thought, 2 gallons. For 1, too much. For 2, just right. And if not for 2? If for those who need it? The thought, simple as a pinch of salt, settled on the kitchen table beside Pete's empty bowl, which Ruth still hadn't put away. Not this time. Mildred paid every Sunday, $16 for 2 quarts, and paid the way people pay when the money is not a sum, but an act. She pulled 2 5s and 6 1s from her apron pocket, always exact change, as if she'd gone to the store beforehand and asked for small bills. And Ruth suspected she had. And the fuss over change was Mildred's way of saying, "I'm not giving a handout, I'm paying. And the payment is precise, and the conscience is clean." $16 a week, $64 a month. Modest, but for the first time in 2 years since Pete, Ruth held money she'd earned, not received. And the difference between earned and received was felt not in the wallet, but deeper, where dignity lives, and where dignity had been lying curled up for 2 years like a cat on a radiator. Not dead, but not moving. Now, it moved. Fran, friend from the floor above, retired nurse, a woman who knew more about every resident in the building than the mailman did, and considered this not nosiness but civic duty, learned about Mildred's $16 on Tuesday when she came by for salt. In this building, people came for salt more often than they went to the store, and salt was not a seasoning, but a password for a visit. She saw the containers on the counter, 5 quarts, labelled in marker. Mildred, son, 2 quarts. And her eyes lit with the fire that lights in retired nurses when they spot a chance to intervene in someone's life for everyone's benefit. "Ruth, you're selling chili and keeping quiet about it. You fed 400 kids at that school, and you're embarrassed to feed 1 Mildred. Let me post it on Nextdoor. I'll photograph the pot, write, 'Homemade chili by Ruth Weber, 31 years, school cafeteria, $8 a quart.' And in an hour, you'll have a line longer than the DMV. "Fran, don't," Ruth said, in the voice people use for don't when they want do, but are ashamed. "It's embarrassing, like I'm begging." "You're not begging, Ruth. You're feeding. You've fed people your whole life. 400 children, a husband, a daughter, a son, neighbours. And you fed them for free, for a paycheck, for thank you. Now, for money. And the money is earned, and being embarrassed about what's earned is foolishness. And foolishness at 67 is a luxury you can't afford. I'm posting." She posted, without asking, that same evening. And Ruth learned about it from the sound of her phone, which suddenly began chirping with notifications, as if it had woken from a 2-year sleep. Fran had photographed the pot, blue enamel, chipped handle, and the chili inside it, dark red, thick, with tiny circles of fat on the surface that caught the kitchen light. And the photo looked so good, you could almost smell it through the screen. Fran's caption was pure Fran. "Neighbours, Ruth Weber in 4B makes homemade chili, 31 years school cafeteria, Golden hands, chili like your mama made, but better. $8 per quart. Bring a container or she'll give you one. Message her. The next door post reached the neighborhood, and by evening, 7 messages had come in. Can I get some? How many quarts left? Do you make meatloaf too? Can you do Wednesdays? Do you add beans or no beans? A question that in Kansas carries the weight of a theological dispute. And one from a man on the 3rd floor Ruth had never seen. Ma'am, 2 quarts for Saturday, please. And if you could throw in a piece of that cornbread from the photo. I haven't had cornbread like that since my mom passed. Ruth sat in the kitchen reading the messages, and each one was like a knock at the door with a living, hungry person behind it. And the chili existed, sat on the stove in the blue pot with the chipped handle, and the pot was full. And the fullness, for the first time in 2 years, was not excess, but need. Was she angry at Fran? She was. For about 15 minutes. Then she read the messages again, and the anger drained the way water drains from a sink when you pull the plug. Fast and with a gurgle. The following Sunday, Ruth made not 2 gallons, but 2.5. The pot held 2, and she filled it to the brim, and then some, because a stock pot, like a Kansas woman, always holds more than it looks like it should. She sold 7 quarts. Mildred 2, the man from the 3rd floor 2, a woman from the 1st floor 1, a family from the next building 2. $56 for one Sunday, and the table that evening was empty. Chili gone, containers out with people, and the emptiness of the pot, for the first time in 2 years, was not sad, but working. The emptiness that comes after a good shift, when everything is served and you can exhale. Diane called Sunday at 10, and Ruth told her, carefully, choosing words the way you choose shoes for a sore foot. Not too tight, not too loose. Diane, I've been making chili for the neighbours, for a little money. Fran posted on Nextdoor, and people responded, and I thought... Diane listened in silence, and a bookkeeper's silence is scarier than a prosecutor's, because a prosecutor is silent before an accusation, and a bookkeeper before a calculation. Mum, you're selling chili? Out of your apartment? Not selling, Diane. Cooking and sharing, for a little money. Mum, do you have a food handler's permit? Do you know if this is even legal? What if somebody gets sick? What if someone reports you to the health department? Mum, you're cooking in a home kitchen. No inspection, no certificate. I'm a bookkeeper. I know how this works. Illegal. The word landed on the kitchen table the way a cold iron lands, heavy and with a faint smell of scorch. Diane counted the world in paragraphs and clauses, and in Diane's paragraphs there was no room for chili made by hands that had fed 400 children for 31 years without poisoning a single one. Mum, I'm not trying to upset you, but if something happens, you're on your own. Neither Victor nor I are close by. And if there's a fine, it comes out of your $14.90, Mum. Ruth hung up and sat in the kitchen, and the pot stood on the stove, washed, empty, clean. And the cleanliness was evening cleanliness, the kind that comes after work, and the work was done, and illegal, hung in the air the way the smell hangs after you've turned off the gas. No longer burning, but still there. Ruth thought, Diane is right. Rules exist, fines exist. Thought further, and if I stop? Go back to 5 containers? To chili that's tiresome by Friday? To Pete's empty bowl across the table? And thought a third thing. No. 7 people wrote, "Can I get some?" And each one is a living person. And the chili exists, and the hands exist, and the pot exists. And if the rules are against chili, maybe the rules haven't tasted Ruth Weber's chili. Fran came Wednesday, with banana bread and a piece of news, and the news was the kind that made the banana bread seem like a side dish. Ruth, I'm introducing you. Kyle, 28, works in tech, lives in the house across the street with 2 roommates, all remote, all at their computers all day, eating DoorDash and those sad little rice bowls that deliver calories but not joy. Their fridge is a graveyard of half-eaten takeout containers. My niece, Natasha, is friends with his girlfriend. She told me the boys have nothing to eat and not one of them can cook. Last time Jake tried to boil pasta, it caught fire. Fran, how does pasta catch fire? It's in water. Ruth, he forgot the water. Kyle came Thursday evening, tall, thin, glasses, a t-shirt with a cartoon cat at a keyboard. Ruth didn't get the joke, but approved of the cat. And the expression of a man who's been brought to a grandmother's kitchen to be fed and knows resistance is futile. Ruth sat him down and ladled chili, a full bowl with a dollop of sour cream on top, added at the table, never in the pot. Sour cream in the pot turns acidic. On the bowl, it turns into flavour, and the difference is known to those who've made chili 3,000 times, not 3. Cornbread, 2 squares, thick, and finely chopped scallions on top, and the smell rose from the bowl. Beef, cumin, garlic, with the earthy sweetness of cocoa. And the smell did to a man's face what no compliment can. Relaxed it and made it honest. Kyle took a spoonful, blew on it, tasted, and went quiet. Quiet for 30 seconds, which for a 28-year-old who normally chews, talks, and scrolls his phone simultaneously was a pause equivalent to an intermission at the symphony. He chewed, swallowed, scooped again, and his face shifted from polite to surprised to something private and male and quiet. His mother in Wichita Falls, his grandmother gone 5 years, and DoorDash delivering things called chili that were not chili, the way a phone ringtone is not music. Mrs. Weber, Kyle said, and his voice was serious, the voice of a programmer who's found the solution. Could you cook for us? Regularly. 3 of us, me, Jake, Marcus. Chili Sundays, meatloaf and mashed potatoes Wednesdays, cornbread and soup Fridays. $60 a week each, $180 total. We're done with DoorDash. And cooking ourselves, well, you know, the pasta. $180 a week. Ruth stood at the stove, ladle in hand, and the numbers sounded in the kitchen of a brick apartment building the way an orchestra sounds in a studio apartment. Unexpected, loud, and beautiful. $180 a week was $720 a month, merely half her social security, for chili and meatloaf and cornbread, for what she'd done her whole life, and what a 30-year-old appliance repairman would call grandma's hobby. She looked at Kyle, a skinny kid in glasses eating her chili, and at Pete's bowl across the table, still hadn't put it away, not forgot, but left it, and thought, 2-gallon pot. For one, too much. For Pete, no longer needed. But for 3 hungry boys across the street who can't boil pasta, just right. Wednesdays, meatloaf or meatballs? Ruth asked. And the question was not culinary, but professional. And the professional voice of a 67-year-old woman with a ladle sounded as authoritative as it had for 31 years in the school kitchen, when Ruth commanded 6 pots and 4 assistants, and neither pot nor assistant dared talk back. The subscription ran like clockwork, the kitchen clock with the rooster on it that Pete hung in 1992 and that still ticked above the fridge, counting time between preparations. Chili Sunday, meatloaf Wednesday, cornbread and soup Friday. 3 cooking days, each starting at 5:30 a.m. Ruth used to sleep till 7, but the subscription moved the alarm 2 hours, and neither the alarm nor Ruth objected, because waking at 5:30 for work was easier than waking at 7 for emptiness. Kyle picked up containers after lunch, knocked quietly, took 3 bags, his, Jake's, Marcus's, and sent payment by Zelle before he reached the bottom of the stairs. Not cash, not hand to hand. Embarrassed, the way young men are when paying an older woman for home cooking. because the payment holds something that reminds them of Mum, and remembering Mum while paying feels awkward. And in the hallway after Kyle, the building smelled of chili, thick, insistent. And the smell reached the third floor and the first, and neighbours who hadn't ordered yet sniffed and thought, and neighbours who had ordered sniffed and smiled. 8 regulars from next door settled in. Mildred, permanent, 2 quarts every Sunday. The man from the third floor, who turned out to be Howard, 62, divorced, who ordered not from hunger but from loneliness. Ate slowly, with cornbread, returned the container washed, which, for a man living alone, was the highest mark of respect for another's labour. A woman from the first floor, Marina, 35, 2 kids, husband on the road for work, who took 3 quarts because the kids ate so fast 3 quarts lasted 2 days, and on the third they asked for more. A retired couple, a young pair from the building next door, he security guard, she cashier, both home late, neither able nor willing to cook. And 2 more Ruth knew only by next-door names and by the containers they left at the door. Fran, naturally, didn't stop at next door. In November, she went to Clipper & Co., the hair salon around the corner, for a cut, and left with 4 new customers for Ruth. 4 stylists, women from 30 to 50, working 9 to 6, 20-minute lunch, no restaurant nearby, eating yogurt and cheese sticks, a combination so depressing the scissors seemed to cut sadder. "Ladies," Fran said from the chair with foil on her head, highlights that made her look vaguely extraterrestrial. "My friend Ruth Weber makes home-cooked lunches. Chili, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, cornbread. Like school cafeteria, only actually good. $10 a meal. She'll bring it at noon. You just need a spoon." Brenda, the senior stylist, 50, with eyebrows so perfect they looked born, not drawn, spoke for all 4. "If the chili's as good as you say, we're in. All 4, starting Monday." In December, Kyle called one evening, voice not calm but tense. "Mrs. Weber, we have a problem. Our neighbour Gerald, retired, with a moustache, you don't know him, sent a letter to the HOA. Says a systematic food odour comes from our unit, and he suspects unauthorised commercial food preparation. So far it's a warning. If it happens again, an inspection. Unauthorised commercial food preparation. 4 words that made the kitchen feel colder, though both pots stood on the stove steaming. Ruth sat on the stool, the same one she'd sat on at 3 a.m. after Pete, when the TV murmured to no one. And now the stool felt empty again, and the fear was different. Not the fear of silence, but of losing what she'd found. And losing what you found hurts more than never finding it. Fran came within the hour, no banana bread, a first, serious face, a first, and in the voice retired nurses use when the patient is panicking and panic is contraindicated. "Ruth, calm down. The complaint is about the boys' place, not yours. They reheat your containers, the smell goes through the vents, Gerald sniffs. Have Kyle buy a range hood and reheat with the door closed. You cook in your own kitchen for people you know. You're not a restaurant, you're a neighbour making chili. No HOA goes after a grandmother making chili because a grandmother making chili is not unauthorised food preparation. It's the American way. And if anyone disagrees, they can eat their frozen dinners." Kyle bought a range hood. Gerald's complaint withered. The HOA closed the matter. Measures taken, no repeat complaints. Meanwhile, Ruth spent $14 on an online food handler's course, passed the test, printed the certificate, and taped it inside her kitchen cabinet. Not where anyone could see, but where she knew it was. By January, everything had settled, the way dough settles after kneading. Firm, even, and if left alone, it rests and gets better. 3 remote workers, chili Sunday, meatloaf Wednesday, cornbread and soup Friday. And Kyle picked up at 2 with the punctuality Ruth respected. A programmer used to deadlines arrives on time, and on time in a kitchen is sacred. 8 regular neighbours. Every Sunday chili, some Wednesdays meatloaf, and Howard from the 3rd floor now ordered not just chili, but chicken noodle soup on Thursdays. No onions, as always, and Ruth made him a separate quart, and the quart cost her an extra 20 minutes. But the 20 minutes were repaid by Howard's voice, which every time said, "Mrs. Weber, you are the only woman who remembers I don't eat onions." And the words held more warmth than the soup. Clipper and Company. 4 stylists, every workday, soup and a mane for $10. And Brenda told her clients, "Hold on, I'm finishing lunch. Mrs. Weber brought meatloaf today, and meatloaf doesn't wait." And the clients waited, because a woman eating with that expression on her face cuts hair better afterward. The labelled containers became a trademark, and the idea was not Fran's or Kyle's, but Ruth's own, because 31 years in a school kitchen teach one thing: order. Each container labelled in marker, neat cook's handwriting, name, day, dish. Kyle, Sunday, chili, 2 quarts. Brenda, Monday, meatloaf plus mash. Mildred, Sunday, chili, 2 quarts. Howard, Thursday, soup, 1 quart, no onions. And the labels turned plastic deli containers from packaging into named plates. And a named plate in someone else's home is not business, it's family. And people whose container carries their name stopped being customers and became hers. Kyle photographed his labelled container and posted it in his company Slack, and colleagues in Denver, Austin, and Chicago wrote, "Kyle, what is this? Can we get some? Does she ship to Austin?" And Kyle answered, "She doesn't ship. Move to Wichita. We've got chili." Income. Ruth tracked on a yellow legal pad. Not a notebook. Stevie had found the pad in a drawer during his visit and written "Grandma's Business" on the cover in crayon, and Ruth hadn't corrected it. The programmers brought $720 a month, $180 a week, steady as a paycheck. Except a paycheck is for showing up, and this money was for chili, and chili was more honest. Neighbours, 500 to 700, some ordered weekly, some every other, and the every other ones were those counting their own pennies, and Ruth understood and didn't take offence. Clipper and Company, about 880, 4 meals a day, 22 work days. Total gross in a good month, 2,100 to 2,300. Subtract beef, beans, vegetables, cornmeal, oil, eggs, flour, containers and bags, about 700. Ruth bought beef at the Mexican grocery on South Broadway, where Mr. Garza had sold meat for 20 years, and Garza, learning of the volume, started holding the best pieces. "Mrs. Weber, this one's got the marrow bone. For chili, can't beat it." Franz suggested errands. Gas for the 2 deliveries. Net, 13 to 1,600. Plus Social Security. Plus Diane's $250, which Ruth stopped spending on groceries. Groceries came from earnings now, and started saving for dental work. Teeth at 67, like Kansas roads. Constant repair, constant cost. Together with Social Security, 2,900 to over 3,000, and the number on the legal pad, in Ruth's cook's handwriting, looked back at her the way a full pot looks. Dignified, honest, and warm. She checked the rules. Fran's son-in-law, who worked at H&R Block, explained over coffee, self-employment income over 400 a year was taxable, Schedule C. Ruth could deduct ingredients, containers, gas, even the range hood Kyle bought if she reimbursed him. She started a second section on the legal pad, receipts, and every slip from Garza's, every Dollar Tree run went in. Diane came in March, second visit in 6 months, which, from a daughter in Kansas City, was an event on the scale of a health inspection, only without fines and with chocolate. She walked into the kitchen and stopped, because the kitchen looked different from November. Not quieter, louder. Not emptier, fuller. 2 pots on the stove, the blue enamel with the chipped handle, Pete's the veteran unsinkable, and beside it a new 10-quart aluminium, shining. Both on the flame, steam from both rising to the ceiling, and the ceiling above the stove had darkened from steam, and the dark was not neglect but proof of work, the way a callus on a palm is not disease but evidence. Containers on the table, labelled, ready for pickup. The legal pad open, names, dates, dishes, amounts, handwriting steady and sure. And Ruth, in an apron, flushed from the steam, knife in hand, feet in Pete's old slippers, big, felt, worn, standing in the hallway since 2023, which she hadn't thrown away, and hadn't thrown away correctly, because Pete's slippers on swollen feet after 6 hours of cooking were more comfortable than any others. The table was set for two, not by reflex, intentionally. 2 bowls, 2 spoons, cornbread, 4 squares, thick, Pete style. But the second bowl stood not across, where it had stood 2 years for Pete who wasn't there, but to the side, for Diane who was. Ruth ladled from the blue pot, Pete's pot, the one she'd cooked in for 44 years, and the chili was dark red, thick, and the smell made Diane close her eyes and open them 3 seconds later, wet, and a bookkeeper's wet eyes are the rarest of sights. And the cause was not a balance sheet, but chili. And the chili smelled like childhood, and Diane's childhood smelled exactly like this. Beef, cumin, garlic, cornbread, and her mother's hands. "Mum," Diane said, and the voice was different from November's. Not strict, retire properly, but quiet. "I'm sorry." "Mum, I was wrong. You're not a sweatshop. You're you. And the chili is yours, and the people are yours, and the pot is yours. And Mum, I'm glad. Forgive me for November." Ruth looked at her daughter, 44, eating chili, eyes wet, spoon in hand. And at the cabinet where Pete's bowl now lived, she'd finally put it away. Not because she'd forgotten, but because the spot across the table was now occupied. Not by one person, but by 15. And 15 labelled containers had replaced one empty bowl. And the replacement was not betrayal of memory, but continuation of life. And Pete, who in life said, "Well," and ate in silence, would have approved. And Ruth felt his approval every Sunday when she skimmed the foam from the broth with his wooden spoon. On the stove stood 2 pots, the blue enamel with the chipped handle and the new 10-quart aluminium, both full. In the blue one, chili for those Ruth knew by name and by taste, no onions for Howard, thicker for Brenda, thinner for Kyle, who liked it like soup, not like cement. In the new one, chili for those she didn't yet know, but would, because Fran hadn't stopped and didn't intend to, and next door was growing, and containers were needed, and Ruth was already eyeing a 3rd pot. 2 pots on one stove, old and new, with history and with prospect, both full, and the fullness was right and needed and earned. And the kitchen in a brick apartment building smelled not of loneliness, but of lunch. And 15 people were waiting for that lunch. And each of the 15 knew. Sunday chili, Wednesday meatloaf, Friday cornbread and soup. And the schedule was more reliable than any contract, because a contract is signed with a pen, and Ruth Weber's chili is signed with a spoon, and a spoon is more binding. Let's stop and look at what Ruth Weber did to meet her goals and close the gap. She didn't change her habit and didn't learn anything new. She kept making chili every Sunday, in the same pot, the same recipe, the same motion of the hand that over 40 years had become as automatic as breathing. Only now the pot wasn't cooking into emptiness, but for people. A neighbour said, "Let me pay." And chili stopped being loneliness and became income. A friend posted a photo on Nextdoor, and 8 neighbours became regulars. 3 remote workers across the street subscribed to weekly meals, and cooking became a subscription with steady income. Stylists from the salon around the corner ordered daily lunches, and a 4th channel appeared. 4 sources, no single big client, everything from the building, from next door, from around the corner. 13 to 1600 net a month, and the pot is full, and the fullness is right. 3 lessons. First, if you cook a lot, don't shrink the portion, grow the number of eaters. A 2-gallon pot is not a lonely retiree's weakness, it's a ready business model, and 2 gallons of chili at $8 a quart is $64 for one Sunday. Second, people who work from home or nearby and don't have time to cook are your customers. Remote workers, stylists, cashiers, everyone eating a sandwich for lunch dreams of homemade chili and will pay for it. Third, a subscription is more reliable than one-off sales. 3 people who order every week feed you more steadily than 30 one-timers, and steadiness lets you plan how much to buy, how much to cook, how much to earn. If you cook, make jam, sew, bake, fix things, and have no one to share it with, look around. Someone nearby will pay for what you give away free. You just have to hear, "Let me pay," and not be afraid of the answer. Don't stay quiet. Write in the comments what you know how to do. To you, it's habit. To someone else, it's a clue to real money. Hit like so this story reaches the people who need it. Subscribe. This is where we tell stories of people who stopped being embarrassed and started earning with what they do best.